Welcome and settle in. Tonight, we are setting sail across one of the oldest stories ever told. Long before books lined library shelves, before printing presses or electric lights, travelers gathered around crackling fires to hear tales carried from one generation to the next. These stories crossed mountains and islands, drifted through crowded marketplaces, and echoed inside great stone halls. Among them all, few journeys have traveled farther through time than the tale we know today as the Odyssey. As you grow comfortable, imagine the gentle rocking of a wooden ship upon calm water. Somewhere in the distance, waves rise and fall against a quiet shore. It is here, beneath the same constellations that guided ancient sailors nearly 3,000 years ago, that our story begins. The world of the Odyssey was both familiar and mysterious. Olive trees covered sunlit hillsides. Small fishing boats rested in sheltered harbors. Shepherds watched their flocks from rocky slopes while merchants carried jars of olive oil, wine, and honey between islands scattered across the Aegean Sea. Every harbor held stories. Every island seemed to promise another adventure beyond the horizon. The people who first heard this tale believed that the sea itself possessed a personality. To travel by ship was to trust both skill and fortune. Every voyage depended upon favorable winds, sturdy timbers, and, perhaps most importantly, the goodwill of the gods. Whether those gods truly walked among mortals was a matter of faith, but in the stories of ancient Greece, they certainly did. Zeus ruled from Mount Olympus, while Athena offered wisdom to heroes and craftsmen alike. Poseidon governed the seas, capable of blessing sailors with smooth waters or sending storms powerful enough to scatter entire fleets. In this ancient world, divine beings were never far away. They whispered through dreams, disguised themselves as strangers, and occasionally altered the course of human lives with a single decision. Our hero tonight is Odysseus, king of the small island kingdom of Ithaca. Unlike many legendary warriors, he was not remembered for extraordinary strength alone. Instead, he became famous for his patience, cleverness, curiosity, and remarkable ability to solve impossible problems. These qualities would carry him farther than any sword ever could. When our story opens, a great war has already ended. For 10 long years, Greek kings had fought before the towering walls of the city of Troy. Countless ships crossed the sea carrying soldiers who hoped for glory, wealth, or simply the chance to return home victorious. Eventually, through courage, endurance, and no small amount of clever planning, Troy finally fell. For most surviving warriors, the next chapter should have been simple: return home. Yet for Odysseus, the journey proved far longer than anyone could have imagined. His voyage back to Ithaca would stretch across another 10 years. He would meet kings and queens, shepherds and sailors, monsters and immortals. Some would offer kindness, others would test his courage. All would leave their mark upon the long road home. But despite the extraordinary events woven throughout this epic, the Odyssey is, at its heart, a surprisingly human story. It is a story about missing home, about wondering what has changed while you have been away, about family waiting across impossible distances. And perhaps most of all, it reminds us that the greatest journeys are not always measured in miles, but in patience, wisdom, and hope. The remarkable thing is that this story survived for centuries before anyone ever wrote it down. Most historians believe the Odyssey was composed sometime around the 8th century BCE, though the events it describes may reflect an even earlier age remembered through generations of oral tradition. Skilled storytellers, known as bards, memorized thousands upon thousands of lines of poetry. They traveled from town to town, performing these epics entirely from memory while accompanying themselves with simple musical instruments. Each performance was slightly different. Details shifted. Descriptions grew or shrank depending upon the audience. Yet the heart of the story remained the same, passed carefully from one voice to another until it became one of humanity's greatest literary treasures. The poet traditionally credited with composing the Odyssey is Homer. Whether Homer was a single individual, several storytellers whose works blended together, or a name representing a long tradition of poets remains one of history's enduring mysteries. Whatever the answer may be, the story itself has endured through nearly 3 millennia, translated into hundreds of languages and inspiring countless books, paintings, plays, films, and works of art. Tonight, however, we are not rushing from one dramatic moment to the next. Instead, we will travel slowly. We will pause to admire the quiet harbors where fishermen repair their nets beneath the afternoon sun. We will wander olive groves where cicadas sing through the warm air. We will visit royal halls illuminated by flickering oil lamps and listen as ancient musicians perform songs carried across generations. Along the way, we'll explore the customs, beliefs, and daily lives of the people who imagined this remarkable world. So take a slow breath, settle comfortably, and allow the sounds of the ancient Mediterranean to surround you. The stars have risen. The sea is calm. The sail catches a gentle breeze. And somewhere beyond the dark horizon, a traveler has already begun the long journey home. The morning sun rose gently over the islands of Greece, casting long golden rays across quiet harbors where fishing boats rocked lazily against weathered wooden docks. Across this peaceful landscape, countless lives had been changed forever. A great war had finally come to an end. For 10 long years, kings and warriors from across the Greek world had crossed the Aegean Sea to lay siege to the mighty city of Troy. The reasons for the conflict had become legendary even before the fighting ended. A prince, a queen, broken promises, wounded pride, and the ambitions of powerful rulers. Songs would one day celebrate heroic duels and famous victories, but behind every tale of glory were ordinary people who simply longed to return home. Among them was Odysseus, king of the small island kingdom of Ithaca. Unlike the rulers of larger kingdoms, Odysseus governed a rugged island of steep hills, olive groves, quiet beaches, and scattered farms. Ithaca was not especially wealthy or grand. Its rocky landscape offered little room for sprawling cities, yet its people knew the rhythms of the sea better than most. For Odysseus, Ithaca was more than a kingdom. It was home. Waiting there was his wife, Penelope, whose patience would become almost as famous as his own adventures. Their son, Telemachus, had been only an infant when his father sailed away to war. 10 years had passed. The tiny child who had waved goodbye from the shoreline was now nearly a grown man. Odysseus had missed every birthday. As one year blended into another before the walls of Troy, he often wondered what his island looked like now. Had the olive trees grown taller? Would his faithful old dog still recognize him after so many years? These quiet thoughts sustained him through the hardships of war. When Troy finally fell, celebration spread throughout the Greek camp. Ships were repaired. Sailors eagerly prepared for the long voyage home. Across the beaches where armies had once assembled, laughter slowly replaced the sounds of battle. For most of the Greek kings, the journey home promised relief. For Odysseus, it promised something even greater: a reunion. Ancient Greek sailors understood that every voyage depended upon nature's cooperation. Before departing, they carefully examined their ships. Hulls were patched with fresh timber and pitch. The ships themselves were remarkable creations. Built from sturdy pine and oak, they were long and narrow, designed to travel swiftly across coastal waters. A single square sail captured favorable winds, while rows of oars provided movement whenever the sea became calm. At night, crews often pulled their vessels onto sandy beaches rather than risk sailing in darkness, where unseen rocks and shifting currents could prove dangerous. Navigation relied upon experience more than instruments. Captains watched the stars. The sea itself became a map, its waves carrying stories learned over generations. As Odysseus prepared to leave Troy, he likely believed the voyage would take only weeks or perhaps a few months, depending upon the weather. No sailor could have imagined that he would not see Ithaca again for another decade. But in the world of Greek mythology, the sea belonged to Poseidon. The god of the oceans was powerful, unpredictable, and deeply respected by every sailor who ventured beyond sight of land. Storms were not merely changes in weather. They were often understood as expressions of divine emotion. While many of the Olympian gods admired Odysseus for his intelligence and determination, not all viewed him kindly. Far above the earth, upon the cloud-covered heights of Mount Olympus, the gods observed the affairs of mortals much as spectators might watch a play unfold upon a stage. Zeus, ruler of the heavens, maintained the balance of the world. Athena favored wisdom, strategy, and thoughtful leadership. She had long admired Odysseus, seeing in him a rare combination of courage and cleverness. Again and again during the Trojan War, his careful thinking had succeeded where brute strength had failed. Yet despite Athena's support, Odysseus remained absent from home. Years passed. His wife waited faithfully. His son grew older. His kingdom slowly drifted into uncertainty. In Ithaca, rumors became common. Some believed their king had perished at sea. Others insisted he had settled upon some distant island. Without certainty, ambitious nobles began gathering inside Odysseus' palace, each hoping to marry Penelope and claim the throne for himself. They feasted at his tables. They drank his wine. They consumed the stores meant for the royal household. All the while, Penelope quietly delayed making any decision, believing that somewhere beyond the horizon, her husband still lived. Athena watched these events with growing concern. She saw not only a missing king, but a family slowly unraveling through years of uncertainty. She understood that time itself could become as dangerous as any monster or storm. And so, among the immortals, conversations began. Could Odysseus finally be allowed to return? Had he suffered enough? The answer would shape one of history's greatest journeys. But before the king of Ithaca could step once more upon his beloved shores, the sea still held many stories waiting to be told. As evening settled over Greece, the last light of the sun faded into soft shades of amber and violet. Gentle waves lapped against quiet beaches while fishing boats returned home one by one. The road home had finally begun. While Odysseus remained far from home, life on the island of Ithaca continued as the seasons quietly turned. Nature moved with comforting rhythm. Yet within the royal palace, time seemed strangely suspended. No one knew whether their king still lived. For nearly 20 years, the great hall of Odysseus had stood without its rightful ruler. His carved wooden chair remained empty. His hunting spears rested undisturbed upon the walls. The palace had become crowded with unexpected visitors. Noblemen from neighboring islands and villages had arrived, each hoping to marry Queen Penelope. If Odysseus had truly died, they reasoned, someone new should become king. Day after day they gathered beneath the palace roof, eating lavish meals, drinking wine from polished cups, and enjoying the generosity that had once belonged to Odysseus alone. Hospitality was one of the highest virtues in ancient Greece. Known as xenia, the sacred bond between host and guest shaped nearly every aspect of daily life. Travelers were welcomed with food, water, and a place to rest before anyone asked their name or purpose. This custom was believed to be protected by Zeus himself, for any stranger might secretly be a god in disguise. Yet the suitors had forgotten this important balance. They gladly accepted hospitality but offered little respect in return. What had once been an act of kindness slowly became a burden upon the household. Through it all, Queen Penelope remained remarkably calm. She was admired throughout Greece not only for her beauty but for her wisdom. Rather than choosing a new husband, she devised a quiet plan. She announced that she would make her decision only after completing a magnificent burial shroud for Odysseus' elderly father, Laertes. Each day she worked diligently at her loom. The suitors watched patiently, believing their long wait would soon end. But each night, after the palace had grown quiet, Penelope secretly unraveled much of her day's work. The cloth never seemed to grow larger. For 3 years she repeated this clever routine, buying precious time while quietly holding on to hope that Odysseus might still return. Living amid this uncertainty was her son, Telemachus. When his father departed for Troy, Telemachus had been far too young to remember him. Nearly every story he knew came from others. As Telemachus matured into a young man, these stories became increasingly important. He often wondered whether he resembled his father. Sometimes he walked alone along Ithaca's rocky coastline, watching distant ships sail across the glittering sea. Every vessel raised a quiet question in his mind. Could my father be aboard one of them? Far above the earth, Athena continued to watch. The goddess of wisdom had long favored Odysseus, but now her attention turned toward his son. She recognized that Telemachus had reached an important moment in his life. Remaining idle would accomplish nothing. If he wished to discover the truth about his father, he would have to seek it himself. So Athena descended from Olympus, disguising herself as a trusted family friend named Mentes. In Greek mythology, the gods rarely appeared in their true forms. Instead, they often visited mortals as travelers, shepherds, merchants, or elderly strangers. When the visitor arrived at the palace, Telemachus welcomed the guest with proper courtesy. Before asking any questions, he offered food, wine, and a comfortable seat. Even amid the chaos created by the suitors, the ancient traditions of hospitality remained alive in the young prince. Only after the meal did the conversation begin. Athena, still disguised, encouraged Telemachus to stop waiting passively. She urged him to gather news from those who had returned from Troy. Perhaps someone had seen Odysseus. Perhaps another king knew what had become of him. The suggestion awakened something within the young prince. For years he had simply endured uncertainty. Now, for the first time, he imagined doing something about it. The following morning, Telemachus called an assembly of Ithaca's citizens, the first such gathering since Odysseus had sailed away decades earlier. Elders, fishermen, shepherds, craftsmen, and farmers assembled beneath the open sky to hear him speak. Though still young, Telemachus stood with quiet confidence. He spoke of the palace being consumed by the endless feasts of the suitors. He asked for fairness, respect, and justice. Some among the crowd sympathized deeply, remembering the wise rule of Odysseus. Others remained hesitant, uncertain how events might unfold. Little changed that day, yet something important had begun. Telemachus had found his own voice. Soon afterward, with Athena's unseen guidance, a sturdy ship was quietly prepared beneath the cover of night. Its sail was carefully folded. Oars rested neatly along the benches. Amphorae of fresh water and baskets of bread were loaded aboard. The sea awaited once more. His first destination would be Pylos, where wise King Nestor still ruled. Nestor had fought beside Odysseus during the Trojan War and was respected throughout Greece for his experience and thoughtful counsel. There, perhaps answers could finally be found. As dawn painted the eastern sky with soft shades of pink and gold, Telemachus stepped aboard the waiting ship. The harbor grew smaller behind him as the sail caught the morning breeze. White seabirds circled overhead, and gentle waves carried the vessel into open water. For the first time in his life, he was not simply waiting for his father's story to continue. He had become part of it himself. While Telemachus searched the seas for news of his father, Odysseus remained on an island unlike any other in the world. Far beyond the familiar coastlines of Greece, beyond the islands marked on a sailor's memory, lay the secluded island of Ogygia. Hidden by distance and surrounded by endless blue water, it was a place where few mortals ever arrived and even fewer departed. It was here that Odysseus had lived for many long years. At first glance, Ogygia seemed almost like paradise. Ancient cedar and cypress trees filled the air with a pleasant fragrance. Birds nested among the branches, filling each morning with soft songs, while butterflies drifted lazily through warm Mediterranean breezes. The island knew no noisy cities. No armies marched across its hills. No merchants hurried through crowded marketplaces. Instead, every day unfolded with remarkable peace. The island belonged to the nymph Calypso. In Greek mythology, nymphs were divine spirits closely connected to nature. Calypso ruled her secluded island alone, living in a spacious cave whose entrance was framed by climbing vines and flowering plants. Inside, warm fires glowed upon carefully built hearths. Outside, 4 crystal-clear springs flowed in different directions, nourishing gardens filled with fragrant herbs and blooming flowers. It was a place where time seemed to move differently. Days blended gently into weeks. Weeks quietly became years. Calypso cared deeply for Odysseus. She admired his courage, his cleverness, and the quiet resilience that had carried him through so many hardships. She offered him comfort, safety, and companionship after years of storms and wandering. Most extraordinary of all, she offered him something no ordinary human had ever possessed: immortality. If Odysseus agreed to remain with her forever, he would never grow old. Together they could live upon Ogygia for all eternity, surrounded by beauty and untouched by the troubles of the outside world. For many people, such an offer might have seemed impossible to refuse. Yet every evening, as the golden light faded across the sea, Odysseus walked alone to the island's western shore. There he sat upon weathered rocks overlooking the endless horizon. He thought of Ithaca. He remembered the scent of olive trees after summer rain. He pictured Penelope working quietly at her loom. He imagined Telemachus, who had been only a baby when he last held him. The years had stolen countless moments that could never be reclaimed. No gift, not even eternal life, could replace home. The ancient Greeks possessed a word for the deep desire to return home: nostos. It meant far more than simply traveling back to a familiar place. It described the emotional journey toward family, belonging, memory, and identity. For Odysseus, home was not merely an island upon a map. It was the life he hoped still waited for him. Far above the earth, events were beginning to change. On Mount Olympus, Athena once again pleaded Odysseus' case before Zeus. She reminded the king of the gods that the clever ruler of Ithaca had suffered enough. 20 years had passed since he first sailed away to Troy. His wife remained faithful. His son had grown into adulthood without knowing his father. Surely, she argued, it was finally time for the journey home to continue. Zeus agreed. The decision was made. The messenger god Hermes received his instructions and immediately departed Olympus. Hermes was known for his winged sandals, which allowed him to travel effortlessly between the realms of gods and mortals. Swift as the wind, he crossed the sea until Ogygia appeared below like a green jewel floating upon brilliant blue water. Calypso welcomed the divine visitor with proper hospitality, offering food and drink before asking why he had come. Hermes delivered Zeus's command with calm certainty. Odysseus must be released. His destiny was no longer upon Ogygia. Though saddened by the decision, Calypso understood that even she could not oppose the will of Olympus. She found Odysseus sitting beside the sea, exactly where he often spent his evenings gazing toward the western horizon. She gently told him the news. At first, he could scarcely believe it. Yet Calypso spoke sincerely. She would help him prepare for the voyage. Together they began gathering materials from the island's forests. Odysseus selected tall, straight trees and carefully shaped them using bronze tools. The trunks became sturdy beams lashed tightly together with rope. A strong mast rose from the center, supporting a freshly woven sail. The work occupied several peaceful days. Unlike the hurried preparations before battle, this labor unfolded slowly and thoughtfully. Each knot was tied with care. Every plank was fitted securely. Years of experience as a sailor returned naturally to Odysseus' hands. Before his departure, Calypso provided generous supplies. Fresh water, bread, dried meat, warm clothing, everything a lone sailor might need while crossing the open sea. Finally, the morning arrived. A gentle breeze stirred the sail as the raft floated into the clear water. Calypso stood quietly upon the shore, watching as the vessel drifted farther from the island. Odysseus looked back one final time. Ogygia had offered safety, beauty, and even immortality. Yet none of those gifts had been enough to quiet the simple longing for home. As the island slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, only the open sea remained ahead. For the first time in many years, the king of Ithaca was once again sailing toward his own uncertain future. The voyage home had truly begun. For 17 peaceful days, the sea was kind. Odysseus sailed alone upon the raft he had built with his own hands, leaving the hidden island of Ogygia farther behind with each passing sunrise. Gentle winds filled his square sail, carrying him steadily across the open Mediterranean. During the day, the sun marked his path across the sky. At night, he steered by the familiar constellations that generations of Greek sailors had trusted long before maps existed. The stars were more than beautiful lights overhead. To ancient mariners, they were faithful companions. By watching their slow movements, experienced sailors could maintain their course even when surrounded by nothing but endless water. Odysseus had spent much of his life at sea. Although he was a king, he was also an accomplished navigator. Alone upon his small raft, these skills became his greatest allies. Each morning followed a gentle rhythm. He adjusted the sail to meet the breeze. He checked the ropes that secured the mast. He rationed his food and fresh water carefully, knowing that no one could predict how long the voyage might last. At midday, the sea often became almost perfectly still. Sunlight danced across the waves in countless shimmering reflections, while flying fish occasionally leaped above the surface before disappearing again beneath the water. Dolphins sometimes appeared beside the raft, gliding effortlessly through the swells as if escorting the lonely traveler on his long journey home. For the first time in many years, hope seemed stronger than uncertainty. Far ahead, beyond the horizon, lay the land of the Phaeacians, a peaceful kingdom whose people were renowned throughout Greek legend for their remarkable ships and unmatched skill as sailors. If Odysseus could reach their shores, perhaps the final steps of his journey home would finally begin. But not every immortal welcomed his return. While Zeus had ordered Odysseus released from Calypso's island, another powerful god had been absent from that decision. Poseidon, the ruler of the sea, had been away among distant lands, where the Ethiopians offered sacrifices in his honor. Upon returning, he gazed across the waters and immediately noticed the tiny raft drifting steadily toward home. His anger awakened at once. Long before these events, Odysseus had blinded the Cyclops Polyphemus while escaping from the giant's cave. Polyphemus was no ordinary creature. He was Poseidon's son. Though many years had passed, the sea god had never forgotten the injury inflicted upon his child. Gods, like mortals, could remember old grievances for a very long time. As Poseidon raised his mighty trident, the calm sea began to change. At first, only a cool breeze disturbed the air. Clouds gathered quietly along the distant horizon. The blue sky slowly faded beneath dark gray shadows. Then the wind strengthened. Within moments, gentle swells transformed into towering waves that rose like moving hills upon the sea. The peaceful rhythm of the voyage disappeared beneath roaring wind and crashing water. Odysseus lowered his sail as quickly as he could, hoping to keep the raft from overturning. Rain poured from the sky, while fierce gusts whipped spray across his face. The carefully built timbers groaned beneath the strain of the storm. Ancient Greek sailors respected storms with profound humility. Without modern weather forecasts, every voyage carried uncertainty. Storms could appear suddenly, trapping ships far from land. Many vessels preferred to remain close to shore whenever possible, beaching each evening rather than risking open water after sunset. Odysseus had no such choice. The storm surrounded him on every side. Waves lifted the raft high into the air before dropping it sharply into deep valleys between the swells. The sea no longer felt like a pathway leading home. Instead, it had become a restless wilderness. For 2 long days, the tempest continued. The wind howled without pause. Foaming water crashed endlessly against the raft. Exhausted, Odysseus clung to the timbers he had so carefully crafted only weeks before. Even amid the storm, however, the gods had not entirely abandoned him. A sea goddess named Ino watched the struggle with compassion. According to Greek mythology, she had once been mortal herself before becoming a divine protector of sailors. Rising gently above the waves, she appeared before Odysseus and offered him a magical veil. She instructed him to remove his heavy clothing, abandon the broken raft when the time came, wrap the veil around his chest, and trust the sea to carry him safely toward land. Though the advice seemed difficult to believe, Odysseus accepted the gift. Soon afterward, an enormous wave crashed over the raft with tremendous force. The carefully joined beams finally separated. The mast snapped. The sail disappeared beneath the churning water. The raft that had carried him across hundreds of miles simply ceased to exist. Now there was only the sea. Odysseus wrapped Ino's veil around himself and began to swim. Hour after hour, he rose and fell with the waves, conserving his strength whenever possible. Rather than fighting every current, he allowed the sea to carry him while guiding his direction as best he could. At last, after endless effort, something appeared ahead. Dark cliffs emerged through the mist, their rocky faces rising steeply from the water. Although reaching shore brought hope, it also presented new danger. Powerful waves crashed directly against the rocks, threatening to throw any swimmer into the stone with terrible force. Patiently, Odysseus searched the coastline. Finally, he discovered the mouth of a quiet river flowing gently into the sea. There, the current softened, allowing him to swim safely inland. Weak and exhausted, he crawled onto solid ground. For a long while, he simply lay still, grateful to feel earth beneath him once again. As evening settled over the unfamiliar land, Odysseus looked around carefully. Tall trees sheltered the riverbank. Soft grass covered the forest floor. The air smelled of fresh leaves instead of salt. Gathering fallen branches and dry leaves, he made a simple bed beneath two intertwined olive bushes. Pulling the leaves over himself like a blanket, he drifted into the deepest sleep he had known in many years. The storm had passed. Ahead lay the mysterious kingdom of the Phaeacians, though Odysseus did not yet know their name. For now, the weary traveler rested peacefully beneath the trees, while the stars slowly emerged overhead and gentle waves whispered far away along the quiet shore. When dawn arrived, soft rays of sunlight filtered through the branches of the olive trees where Odysseus had found shelter. The storm had vanished as completely as if it had never existed. Birds greeted the morning with cheerful songs, and the nearby river flowed quietly toward the sea, reflecting the pale blue sky. For a few peaceful moments, Odysseus simply listened. After years of wandering, and after surviving another trial upon the sea, the sounds of running water and rustling leaves felt like a welcome gift. Not far away stood the kingdom of the Phaeacians. The Phaeacians were famous throughout Greek legend as remarkable sailors. Their ships were said to glide across the sea almost effortlessly, carried by divine favor and generations of experience. Unlike many neighboring kingdoms, they preferred peace over conquest. They were known for their hospitality, skilled craftsmanship, music, dancing, and love of storytelling. Yet Odysseus knew none of this. As he cautiously left the shelter of the trees, he wondered only one thing. Would the people of this land welcome a weary stranger? At that very moment, Athena was quietly guiding events once again. The goddess appeared in a dream to Princess Nausicaa, the daughter of King Alcinous and Queen Arete. Disguised as one of the princess's companions, Athena gently suggested that it was time to wash the family's clothing in the nearby river before an upcoming celebration. The idea seemed perfectly ordinary. When morning came, Nausicaa asked her father for a wagon to carry baskets of linens to the river. King Alcinous happily agreed, never suspecting that the gods had arranged the day's events. Soon the princess and several young attendants left the city. Oxen pulled the wooden wagon along a quiet road bordered by olive groves and fruit trees. The morning air carried the scent of wild herbs growing among the rocks, while cicadas sang beneath the warming Mediterranean sun. Upon reaching the river, the women unloaded their baskets and began their work. In the ancient world, washing clothing required patience and effort. Garments were soaked in fresh water, scrubbed by hand, and laid across smooth stones or grassy banks to dry beneath the bright sunshine. It was a task repeated countless times in every household throughout Greece. When their work was finished, they enjoyed a simple meal beside the river before laughing together and tossing a brightly colored ball back and forth across the meadow. One playful throw sailed too far. The ball landed in the water with a loud splash. The surprised cries of the young women echoed through the quiet valley. Nearby, Odysseus awoke. Still dressed in little more than leaves and branches gathered for warmth during the night, he stepped carefully from the woods. He paused, realizing he must appear like a wild man after weeks at sea and days of hardship. The attendants saw him first. Startled by the unexpected stranger, they scattered in every direction. Only Nausicaa remained. Athena quietly strengthened the young princess with courage, allowing her to stand calmly while the others fled. Odysseus wisely kept his distance. Rather than rushing toward her, he spoke gently and respectfully. He praised her kindness and asked only for simple necessities, a piece of clothing and directions to the nearest town. His careful words revealed both humility and wisdom. Nausicaa immediately recognized that this stranger, though weary and weathered, possessed the manners of a nobleman. She instructed her attendants to return. Together they brought clean clothing, fresh bread, wine, and olive oil so that Odysseus could bathe in the river. After washing away the salt of the sea and the dust of his long journey, Odysseus emerged looking far different than before. Athena, wishing to help her favorite hero, quietly enhanced his appearance, making him seem taller, healthier, and filled with quiet dignity. The attendants could scarcely believe he was the same traveler. Nausicaa smiled warmly. She explained that the nearby city belonged to her father, King Alcinous. However, she also understood how easily gossip could spread in a small kingdom. To avoid misunderstandings, she suggested that Odysseus follow the wagon at a respectful distance rather than walking beside her. It was thoughtful advice. Hospitality was deeply valued among the Greeks, but so too was reputation. Odysseus gladly agreed. As the princess and her companions guided the wagon homeward, he followed quietly through the peaceful countryside. Olive trees lined the road, vineyards stretched across gentle hills, and orchards heavy with fruit surrounded prosperous farms. At last the city appeared. High stone walls protected the harbor, where elegant ships rested quietly upon the water. Beyond them stood broad streets, carefully built homes, and the magnificent palace of King Alcinous, its bronze doors gleaming softly in the afternoon light. For the first time in many years, Odysseus stood before a place that felt not dangerous or mysterious, but welcoming. He had survived the sea. Now he would discover whether kindness still awaited a traveler far from home. As the afternoon sun settled lower in the sky, Odysseus approached the magnificent palace of King Alcinous. The walls seemed to glow with polished bronze, while tall doors shimmered with decorative gold. To visitors from distant lands, the palace appeared almost magical, though its greatest treasures were not jewels or precious metals. Its greatest treasure was hospitality. Among the ancient Greeks, welcoming a stranger was considered a sacred duty. A traveler who arrived weary from the road or sea was first offered food, drink, and a place to rest. Only afterward would anyone politely ask who the visitor was or where they had come from. Odysseus entered quietly. Athena, still watching over him, wrapped him in a gentle mist so that he could pass unnoticed through the busy halls until he reached Queen Arete. The queen was known throughout the kingdom for her wisdom, and even King Alcinous often sought her advice before making important decisions. When Odysseus reached her, he respectfully knelt and asked only for safe passage home. At that very moment, Athena lifted the mist. The entire hall fell silent. King Alcinous immediately welcomed the stranger, inviting him to rise and take a seat among the honored guests. Servants hurried forward with fresh bread, roasted meat, olives, cheese, and cups of watered wine. Others brought warm water for washing hands before the evening meal. Meals in ancient Greece were unhurried occasions. Guests reclined on comfortable couches surrounding low wooden tables while conversation flowed gently between courses. Oil lamps cast a warm golden light across painted walls, and the pleasant scent of burning cedar drifted through the hall. No one questioned the stranger's identity. For now, he was simply a guest deserving kindness. The following morning, King Alcinous announced a great feast in honor of their visitor. Across the city, people gathered to celebrate with music, athletic contests, and shared meals. Bakers prepared fresh loaves of bread while fishermen returned with their morning catch. Farmers brought figs, grapes, and jars of fragrant olive oil from the surrounding countryside. Festivals were among the happiest moments in Greek life. They offered opportunities not only to eat and celebrate, but also to strengthen friendships and honor both guests and the gods. At the center of the celebration sat a man named Demodocus. He was the kingdom's most respected bard. In ancient Greece, bards served as both entertainers and keepers of history. Long before books became common, they preserved stories by committing thousands of verses to memory. Accompanied by the gentle music of a lyre, they sang of heroes, distant lands, great voyages, and the deeds of earlier generations. Demodocus was blind, yet his memory was extraordinary. When the hall grew quiet, he began to sing. His voice carried softly through the palace as he told the story of the Trojan War, the long siege, the courage of the Greek kings, and the clever strategies that had finally brought the conflict to its end. As Odysseus listened, memories long buried began to return. He remembered the faces of companions who had sailed beside him. He remembered evenings around campfires outside the walls of Troy. He remembered victories, losses, and the countless years spent far from home. Quietly, he lowered his head. Without wishing anyone to notice, tears slipped down his face. The others remained absorbed in the song, but King Alcinous observed the stranger carefully. He saw that each time Demodocus sang of Troy, the unknown guest became deeply moved. The king chose not to ask questions immediately. Instead, he gently changed the mood by calling for athletic games outside the palace. The Phaeacians delighted in friendly competition. Young men demonstrated running, wrestling, jumping, boxing, and discus throwing, while crowds gathered beneath the warm afternoon sun to cheer each event. One competitor jokingly suggested that the weary traveler looked too tired to join them. Odysseus smiled politely. Although he had endured years of hardship, he accepted the invitation with quiet confidence. Taking up a heavy discus, he spun gracefully and launched it high into the air. It sailed far beyond every previous throw before landing with a solid thud upon the field. The spectators erupted in admiration. The throw reminded everyone that their mysterious guest was no ordinary wanderer. As evening approached, everyone returned to the palace for another feast. Musicians played gentle melodies while dancers moved gracefully across the polished floor, their steps perfectly timed to the rhythm of the lyre and flute. King Alcinous finally turned to his honored guest. With kindness rather than curiosity, he asked the question everyone had patiently waited to hear. "Tell us your name," he said, "and share the story of your travels, so that we may understand the journey that has brought you to our shores." The hall became wonderfully still. Oil lamps flickered softly. Outside, waves lapped against the harbor walls. After many years of silence, Odysseus took a slow breath. At last, he was ready to tell the remarkable story of how a simple voyage home had become one of the greatest journeys ever remembered. The great hall of King Alcinous grew perfectly quiet. Every face turned toward the traveler who had arrived as a stranger but was now honored as a guest. The flames of the oil lamps danced gently against the polished walls, while beyond the palace windows the evening sea reflected the first stars of the night. Odysseus took a slow breath. "My name," he began, "is Odysseus, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca." A murmur of recognition spread through the hall. The Phaeacians had heard stories of the clever king whose wisdom had helped bring the long Trojan War to its end. Now he sat before them in person, weathered by years of wandering but alive to tell his own tale. He began where his long journey home had truly started. After the fall of Troy, 12 Greek ships carrying Odysseus and his companions sailed away from the ruined city. Their sails filled with favorable winds, and for a short time everyone believed they would soon see home again. The men were in high spirits. The hardships of war lay behind them. Ahead waited families, quiet villages and peaceful lives that had been postponed for 10 long years. The sea stretched endlessly before them, sparkling beneath the Mediterranean sun. During calm afternoons, the sailors repaired ropes, polished shields, and shared stories about the homes they longed to see again. At night, they beached their ships along quiet shores whenever possible, lighting small campfires and sleeping beneath blankets of stars. For ancient sailors, journeys unfolded at the pace of nature. There were no engines to hurry them. Only the wind determined how quickly they traveled. Their first stop came at the land of the Cyclones, where difficult choices delayed the voyage. Although Odysseus would later remember that encounter with regret, he chose not to dwell upon it. His thoughts instead turned toward another place, one far stranger and far more mysterious. Soon fierce winds drove the fleet far from its intended course. For 9 days the ships wandered across unfamiliar waters. Land disappeared behind the horizon, and even the most experienced sailors struggled to recognize the sea around them. At last, on the 10th morning, a low green coastline appeared through the mist. The beaches looked peaceful. Gentle waves rolled onto soft sand. Tall grasses swayed in the warm breeze. There were no signs of danger. Odysseus ordered 2 of his men, along with a trusted messenger, to explore the island and learn who lived there. It seemed like a sensible decision. Fresh water and supplies would soon be needed, and perhaps the islanders would offer the hospitality that travelers often received throughout the Greek world. The 3 men disappeared inland. They found not soldiers or fierce warriors, but gentle people living quiet and simple lives. These inhabitants were known as the Lotus Eaters. Rather than offering bread or wine to their visitors, they shared the fruit of the lotus plant. In Homer's story, the lotus was no ordinary flower. Its sweet fruit possessed a remarkable quality. Anyone who tasted it forgot the desire to return home. There was no pain, no fear, no longing, only a peaceful contentment that made every ambition slowly drift away. The men who sampled the fruit no longer wished to continue the voyage. They wandered happily among the Lotus Eaters, showing no interest in their ships or the families waiting across the sea. When they failed to return, Odysseus went looking for them. He found his companions smiling peacefully, entirely unconcerned about Ithaca, their loved ones, or the long journey that remained. The sight deeply troubled him. Odysseus understood that the greatest danger was not always a monster or a storm. Sometimes it was simply forgetting what mattered most. Without hesitation, he gently but firmly led his companions back to the waiting ships. Though they protested and wished to remain, he ordered the sailors to carry them aboard and secure them until the fleet had safely departed. The oars dipped into the water. The sails caught the wind. Slowly, the island faded into the distance. As he recalled the episode, Odysseus paused thoughtfully. Perhaps the Lotus Eaters represented more than a mythical people. To generations of listeners, they offered a quiet reminder that comfort without purpose can slowly steal our ambitions. Even the sweetest distractions may cause us to lose sight of the people and places we love. For Odysseus, the memory of Ithaca remained stronger than any enchantment. His heart still pointed home. As the Phaeacians listened, they imagined the fleet sailing once more into open water, leaving the peaceful island behind. Ahead lay new horizons, unfamiliar coastlines, and adventures far greater than anyone aboard could possibly imagine. The sea remained calm. The wind remained favorable. Yet somewhere beyond the next horizon stood a lonely island marked by towering cliffs and hidden caves. It was there that Odysseus would soon meet one of the most unforgettable figures in all of Greek mythology. a giant shepherd with only a single eye. As Odysseus continued his tale before the Phaeacian king and his guests, the great hall grew quieter with every word. The listeners had heard of storms and distant islands, but now they leaned closer as the traveler described the strange land that had tested his courage more than almost any other place on his journey. After leaving the Lotus Eaters behind, Odysseus and his companions sailed onward across the endless sea. For a time, the voyage was peaceful. The ships moved beneath favorable winds, their sails glowing white beneath the sun. The men began to hope that perhaps their troubles were finally behind them. Yet the ancient world was filled with unknown shores, and every island carried its own mysteries. Soon, they reached a rugged coastline covered with forests and steep mountains. From the sea, the island appeared untouched by civilization. There were no cities along the shore, no cultivated fields stretching across the hills, and no smoke rising from village fires. Instead, there were only cliffs, caves, and wide open pastures. The island belonged to a race of giants known as the Cyclopes. The Cyclopes were unlike ordinary people. In Greek mythology, they were powerful beings with enormous strength and a single eye in the center of their forehead. They lived apart from other societies, each caring for their own flocks and following their own customs. Unlike the Greeks, who built cities and gathered in communities, the Cyclopes lived alone. They had no assemblies, no shared laws, no traditions of welcoming strangers. To Odysseus, this was unusual and unsettling. The Greeks believed civilization depended upon cooperation. Villages, farms, and kingdoms were connected by shared responsibilities. Kings protected their people, citizens contributed to their communities, and strangers were offered hospitality when they arrived at a foreign shore. The Cyclopes followed a very different way of life. Yet Odysseus was curious. He wanted to learn more about the inhabitants of the island and discover what kind of people lived there. Taking a group of his men, he entered the countryside and found a massive cave overlooking the sea. Inside were signs of a shepherd's life. The cave belonged to Polyphemus, the most famous of the Cyclopes. At first, Odysseus and his men waited patiently for the cave's owner to return. They hoped he would offer them the traditional welcome given to travelers throughout Greece. After all, hospitality was sacred, but Polyphemus did not follow these customs. When the giant returned, he entered the cave carrying an enormous bundle of firewood. His size was overwhelming, and the sailors quickly realized they were in the presence of something far beyond an ordinary man. Polyphemus rolled a massive stone across the entrance of the cave. The stone was so large that no human could have moved it. The Greeks were trapped. The Cyclops noticed the strangers and demanded to know who they were. Rather than welcoming them, he showed only suspicion and anger. The visitors quickly understood that they would need more than strength to escape. Odysseus had always relied upon his greatest gift, his mind. The hero who had helped end the Trojan War knew that cleverness could overcome challenges where force could not. The entrance was sealed. The giant was powerful, and the men were far from their ships and companions. As the days passed inside the cave, Odysseus studied his surroundings carefully. He noticed the giant's habits, the arrangement of the cave, and the enormous wooden staff Polyphemus kept nearby. A plan slowly began forming. The Cyclops possessed great strength, but he lacked something Odysseus valued deeply: wisdom. One evening, Odysseus offered Polyphemus a gift of wine that his crew had carried from their ships. The rich, dark drink was unlike anything the Cyclops had tasted before. Polyphemus enjoyed it greatly. When the giant asked his guest's name, Odysseus gave a clever answer. "My name is Nobody." The Cyclops accepted this strange response. Soon afterward, the wine began to take effect, and Polyphemus fell into a deep sleep. The Greeks moved quickly. They heated a sharpened wooden stake in the fire and prepared themselves for the dangerous task ahead. Working together quietly, they used their intelligence and courage to create a chance for escape. When morning came, Polyphemus discovered that his greatest advantage had been taken away. The cave filled with the giants' cries. The other Cyclopes living nearby heard the noise and came to ask what had happened. "Who is hurting you?" they called from outside. But Polyphemus could only answer, "Nobody is hurting me." Hearing this, the others assumed that nothing was wrong and returned to their own caves. The clever trick had worked, but escaping the cave would require one final act of patience. Odysseus and his men waited until the giant prepared to let his sheep out to graze. Carefully hiding beneath the animals, they slipped past Polyphemus and escaped into the open air. At last, they reached their waiting ships. The men had survived. Yet as they sailed away from the island, Odysseus made one decision that would change the course of his journey forever. Pride overcame caution. From the safety of the sea, he revealed his true name to the Cyclops. Polyphemus called upon his father, Poseidon, asking the god of the sea to punish Odysseus for what had happened. The waves grew restless. The journey home became more difficult, and far across the ocean, a powerful god heard the request of his wounded son. The sea that Odysseus depended upon would soon become his greatest obstacle. After escaping the island of the Cyclops, Odysseus and his companions sailed away with a mixture of relief and worry. They had survived the terrifying encounter with Polyphemus. They had escaped a cave that seemed impossible to leave. They had outsmarted a creature far stronger than themselves. Yet their troubles were not over. The sea stretched endlessly ahead, and every sailor aboard the ships understood that danger could arrive from anywhere. A calm morning could become a violent storm by afternoon. A familiar coastline could hide unknown threats. The journey home remained uncertain. Still, the men continued onward. Their next destination was the island of Aeolia, a mysterious place surrounded by drifting clouds and gentle winds. There lived Aeolus, the keeper of the winds. In Greek mythology, winds were not simply changes in weather. They were powerful forces with personalities and divine origins. Sailors depended on favorable winds to fill their sails, yet they also feared sudden gusts that could drive ships far from their intended paths. Aeolus had been given the special ability to control these winds. He lived upon a floating island, surrounded by enormous bronze walls that protected his peaceful kingdom. Within his palace, the winds were carefully contained, released only when needed. Some winds brought gentle breezes. Others carried fierce storms. Each had its own place and purpose. When Odysseus arrived, Aeolus welcomed him warmly. Unlike the Cyclops, he understood the importance of hospitality. The stranger was treated with respect, offered food and shelter, and invited to share stories of his travels. For an entire month, Odysseus and his companions rested on Aeolus Island. They enjoyed peaceful evenings beside the sea. They shared meals beneath the stars. They repaired their ships and gathered supplies for the next stage of their voyage. For weary sailors who had spent years surrounded by uncertainty, the island must have felt like a small piece of paradise. Eventually, however, the time came to leave. Odysseus explained his desire to return to Ithaca, and Aeolus offered a remarkable gift. Inside a carefully sealed leather bag, he captured all of the dangerous winds that could disrupt the voyage. Only the gentle west wind remained free, allowing the ships to sail steadily toward home. Aeolus gave the bag to Odysseus with one warning: the winds inside must never be released. With this gift, the journey seemed almost effortless. The ships moved quickly across calm waters. The sailors watched the horizon with excitement, knowing that Ithaca was finally within reach. After years of wandering, they were only a short distance away from the homes and families they had missed for so long. For 9 days they sailed. 9 nights passed beneath the stars, and on the 10th morning, the familiar coastline of Ithaca appeared in the distance. The men could hardly believe their eyes. After all their hardships, after storms and monsters and countless miles of open sea, home was finally before them. Exhausted from the long voyage, Odysseus allowed himself to rest. He had spent many sleepless nights guiding the ships and watching the horizon. Now, with Ithaca so close, he trusted his companions to maintain their course. But while Odysseus slept, curiosity began to grow among the sailors. They had noticed the strange leather bag he carried. They wondered what treasure Aeolus had given their king. Perhaps it contained gold. Perhaps it held precious gifts from the gods. Perhaps Odysseus had secretly kept the greatest rewards for himself. The sailors whispered among themselves. Their suspicions grew. Finally, believing they were about to arrive home with nothing while their leader carried hidden riches, they decided to open the bag. The moment the seal was broken, the imprisoned winds escaped. The calm sea vanished instantly. A violent storm erupted around the ships. Winds roared across the waves, twisting the vessels away from Ithaca and driving them back across the sea. The sailors realized their mistake too late, but the damage had already been done. When Odysseus awoke, the island he had dreamed of reaching was gone. The familiar coastline disappeared behind the storm clouds. Years of effort seemed to vanish in a single moment. Overcome by exhaustion and grief, Odysseus looked out across the endless water. He had been so close, yet once again, the sea had carried him away. Eventually, the winds pushed the ships back toward Aeolia. The exhausted sailors returned to the island of Aeolus, hoping perhaps that the keeper of the winds would help them once more. But when Aeolus heard what had happened, he refused. He believed that anyone who could lose such a precious gift must be deeply unlucky, and the gods themselves must oppose his journey. With no further assistance available, Odysseus and his remaining companions departed once again. The sea waited ahead. The road home grew longer, and the lessons of the voyage became clearer. Strength could not solve every problem. Courage could not remove every obstacle. Sometimes, even the smallest mistake could change the course of an entire journey. As the ships disappeared beyond the horizon, the winds settled once more around Aeolia. But for Odysseus, the search for Ithaca continued. After leaving the island of Aeolus behind, Odysseus and his companions continued their uncertain journey across the sea. The loss of the magical winds had been a painful reminder that their voyage was far from simple. Home had appeared within reach, only to disappear again beneath the waves. Yet the sailors had little choice but to continue. Their ships moved onward. Day followed day. The endless blue horizon surrounded them once more. Eventually, they reached the island of Ae, a mysterious land covered in forests and filled with the sounds of birds and wild animals. From the shoreline, it appeared peaceful and untouched. Tall trees stretched toward the sky, streams flowed through green valleys, and the air carried the scent of flowers and herbs. But hidden within the forest lived someone unlike anyone Odysseus had encountered before. Her name was Circe. Circe was a powerful enchantress. a figure who existed between the worlds of gods and mortals. In ancient Greek stories, magic was often connected with knowledge of nature, the ability to understand plants, potions, and hidden forces beyond ordinary human experience. Her home stood deep within the island's forest. A beautiful palace surrounded by wild woodland, it seemed strangely inviting. Wolves and lions wandered nearby, yet instead of attacking visitors, they behaved almost like gentle companions. Under Circe's influence, even wild creatures appeared calm and peaceful. Odysseus sent a group of men to explore the island and discover whether its inhabitants were friendly. Among them was Eurylochus, one of his most trusted companions. The sailors followed a path through the forest until they reached Circe's palace. There they found a welcoming scene. Smoke rose from a warm hearth. The smell of a prepared meal filled the air. The palace doors stood open, inviting them inside. Remembering the importance of hospitality, Circe welcomed the strangers. She offered them food and drink. The weary sailors accepted, but hidden within the meal was a powerful spell. With a touch of her magic wand, Circe transformed the men into pigs. Their bodies changed, but their minds remained the same. They still understood who they were and remembered their homes, their families, and their journey. Their fear and sadness remained trapped within their new forms. Only Eurylochus escaped. He had sensed danger and stayed outside the palace. When he saw what happened to his companions, he rushed back to the ships and warned Odysseus. The king of Ithaca immediately prepared to rescue them. Before he could reach Circe's palace, however, he encountered a mysterious figure along the path. It was Hermes, the messenger god. Hermes understood the danger Odysseus faced and offered him a special herb called moly. This magical plant would protect him from Circe's enchantments. No matter what spell she attempted, the herb would prevent it from taking hold. With this protection, Odysseus entered the palace alone. Circe welcomed him as she had welcomed the others. She prepared the enchanted drink and touched him with her wand, expecting him to transform. But nothing happened. The magic failed. Odysseus stood unchanged. The enchantress was amazed. She realized that this was no ordinary traveler. Someone powerful must be protecting him. Odysseus drew his sword, and Circe immediately understood that she had underestimated her guest. She promised not to harm him or his companions and offered peace between them. Slowly, trust replaced suspicion. Circe restored the sailors to their human forms. When Odysseus' companions saw one another again, they could hardly believe their eyes. The frightening experience had ended, and they were reunited with their leader. Instead of leaving immediately, Circe invited the travelers to remain on a. After so many years of storms, danger, and uncertainty, the island offered something they desperately needed. For an entire year, Odysseus and his men lived peacefully on the island. They enjoyed warm meals beside the fire. They slept safely beneath a roof. They explored the forests and shores. They repaired their ships and recovered their strength. For sailors who had spent years fighting simply to survive, the peaceful days must have felt almost unreal. Yet even paradise can become a place of delay. As the seasons changed, Odysseus began thinking once again of Ithaca. The comforts of Aea were wonderful, but they could not replace home. The memory of Penelope, Telemachus, and his island kingdom remained stronger than any temptation to stay. Eventually, his companions approached him. They reminded him that their journey was unfinished. They had rested long enough. It was time to continue. Circe understood. Before Odysseus departed, she revealed that the path ahead would require a journey unlike any he had taken before. If he wished to learn how to finally reach home, he would need to travel to the edge of the world and seek guidance from the prophet Tiresias. The next stage of his voyage would not lead toward another island. It would lead into darkness, to the land of the dead. As Odysseus prepared his ships once more, the peaceful forests of Ae grew quiet behind him. The island had offered comfort when he needed it most, but the road home still stretched far ahead. The sails rose, the oars moved through the water, and once again, Odysseus sailed toward the unknown. When Odysseus left the island of Ae, he carried with him a task unlike any he had faced before. Circe had told him that the only way to learn the path home was to seek the wisdom of Tiresias, a legendary prophet whose knowledge extended beyond the boundaries of ordinary life. But there was one problem. Tiresias was no longer among the living. To speak with him, Odysseus would have to travel to the edge of the world and enter the realm of the dead. For the ancient Greeks, the underworld was not simply a place of punishment or fear. It was a mysterious realm where the souls of the departed continued their existence in a quiet, shadowy form. Death was understood as a natural part of life's journey, and the world beyond the grave was as much a part of the universe as the earth and sea. Still, few living people dared to seek it. As Odysseus prepared to depart, Circe provided careful instructions. He was to sail northward until he reached the land where the rivers of the world flowed into darkness. There, beyond the edges of familiar lands, he would perform a sacred ritual to call upon the spirits of the dead. The journey itself was unlike any other. There were no bright islands or welcoming shores, no markets filled with merchants, no villages where travelers could rest. Instead, Odysseus sailed toward a place described only through whispers and ancient memory. Eventually, his ships reached the distant shore. The landscape was quiet and cold. A mist seemed to cover everything. The usual sounds of birds, waves, and human voices were absent. The boundary between the living world and the world of spirits felt impossibly thin. Following Circe's instructions, Odysseus prepared the ritual. He dug a small trench in the earth and poured offerings into it. He offered milk, honey, wine, and water, gifts meant to honor those who had passed beyond the mortal world. Then he called upon the spirits, asking them to appear. Slowly, shadows gathered. The first soul to approach was that of Elpenor, one of Odysseus' own companions. Only recently had Elpenor died on Circe's island after an unfortunate accident. In the rush to leave, Odysseus and his crew had not yet given him a proper burial. The sight of his fallen companion deeply affected Odysseus. Elpenor asked him to return and complete the final rites so that his spirit could find peace. Odysseus promised he would. Then another figure appeared. It was Tiresias. Unlike the other spirits, the prophet carried the wisdom and clarity of someone who understood both worlds. He approached the living king and spoke of the challenges still waiting ahead. Tiresias revealed that Odysseus would eventually reach home, but the journey would remain difficult. The greatest dangers would not always come from enemies or monsters. They would come from choices. The prophet warned him about the sacred cattle of the sun god, Helios. If Odysseus' men harmed them, terrible consequences would follow. He also told him that even after reaching Ithaca, his troubles would not immediately end. The journey home was not simply about crossing the sea. It was about restoring balance. After speaking with Tiresias, Odysseus remained among the spirits for a time. Many familiar faces appeared. The first was his mother, Anticlea. Her appearance shocked him. He had not known that she had died while he was away fighting at Troy. When Odysseus attempted to embrace her, his arms passed through her like mist. truth became clear. The dead could speak, they could remember, but they could no longer return to the world of the living. Their conversation was filled with sorrow and love. His mother told him about Ithaca, about Penelope's faithfulness, and about Telemachus growing into adulthood without his father beside him. Odysseus felt the weight of every year he had missed. The years of war, the years at sea, the countless moments he could never recover. Yet hearing that his family still waited gave him renewed determination. Other legendary figures appeared as well. Ancient heroes of Greece who had once stood beside him at Troy now existed only as memories. They spoke of their own journeys, their victories, and the different paths that had brought them to the underworld. Among them were warriors whose names had become famous throughout Greece. Their presence reminded Odysseus that even the greatest heroes were still mortal. Strength faded, kingdoms disappeared, only stories remained. Eventually, Odysseus knew it was time to leave. The realm of the dead had given him knowledge, but he could not remain there. His journey still continued in the world of sunlight, wind, and waves. As his ship departed from the distant shore, he carried with him the warnings of Tiresias and the memories of those he had lost. The sea stretched ahead once more. But now Odysseus understood something important. The path home would not be easy. There would be more storms, more temptations, more moments when patience and wisdom would matter more than strength. Yet for the first time in many years, he knew where he was going. Toward Ithaca, toward his family, toward home. Chapter 12, Songs Across the Sea. After leaving the shadowy land of the dead, Odysseus and his companions returned once again to the island of Odyssey. There, Circe welcomed them and helped them prepare for the next stage of their journey. The travelers had learned much from their time with the enchantress, but they also understood that every day spent away from home was another day lost. Their thoughts remained fixed on Ithaca. Before they departed, Circe offered one final warning. Ahead of them lay a danger unlike any they had faced before. It was not a storm, a monster, or a powerful enemy. It was something far more subtle, a song. Circe told Odysseus about the sirens. These mysterious beings lived beside the sea, surrounded by the remains of ships that had failed to pass their island. Their voices were said to be so beautiful that no sailor who heard them could resist drawing closer. Those who followed the music would forget everything else and remain forever trapped by their desire to listen. The danger was not the sound itself. It was the longing it created. The sirens promised knowledge, beauty, and the answers to every question a traveler might carry. To a curious person like Odysseus, their song would be especially tempting. But Circe had provided a way to survive. She instructed Odysseus to fill his sailors' ears with beeswax so they could not hear the music. If he wished to experience the song himself, he would need to be tied securely to the ship's mast and order his crew never to release him, no matter how desperately he begged. The plan seemed unusual, yet Odysseus had learned that wisdom often meant preparing for dangers before they arrived. When the day came, the ship sailed toward the island of the Sirens. The sea was calm. The sky was bright. The sailors moved quietly as they followed their captain's instructions. Soft wax was pressed into their ears, blocking out the sounds around them. Then they tied Odysseus firmly to the mast. Soon, the island appeared. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The shoreline was peaceful. The waves rolled gently against the rocks. Then the singing began. The sirens' voices drifted across the water like a beautiful dream. They called to Odysseus by name, promising to reveal forgotten secrets and tell him all that had happened throughout the world. They knew of Troy. They knew of his struggles. They knew of his desire to understand everything he had encountered. Odysseus struggled against the ropes. He commanded his crew to turn toward the shore. He begged them to release him, but the sailors could not hear his words. They continued rowing. Slowly, the island disappeared behind them. The song faded, and Odysseus survived. The experience revealed something important about human nature. Even the strongest people can be vulnerable to temptation. Wisdom does not always mean having enough strength to resist every danger alone. Sometimes wisdom means knowing when we need protection from our own weaknesses. The journey continued. Yet another challenge soon appeared. Ahead waited a narrow passage between two terrible dangers. On one side was Scylla, on the other was Charybdis. Charybdis was said to be a massive whirlpool that swallowed the sea and released it again with tremendous force. Sailors who came too close risked losing their entire ships beneath the waves. Scylla, meanwhile, was a monstrous creature who lived high upon a rocky cliff. From her hidden cave, she could reach down toward passing ships and seize sailors from the deck. There was no perfect path. To avoid one danger meant moving closer to the other. Circe had warned Odysseus that he could not defeat both. The safest choice was to steer closer to Scylla and accept that some loss might be unavoidable. It was a painful decision. Odysseus had always tried to protect his companions. Throughout his journey, he had carried the responsibility of every life aboard his ships. But sometimes leadership required accepting difficult choices. As the ship entered the narrow passage, the sailors rowed with all their strength. They kept their eyes forward, avoiding the terrifying waters of Charybdis. Yet from above, Scylla struck. The creature reached down from the cliffs and carried away several sailors before the ship could escape. The remaining men continued onward in silence. They had survived, but the loss reminded them once again of the price of their journey. After so many years at sea, Odysseus had witnessed countless forms of danger. He had learned that courage did not mean feeling no fear. Courage meant continuing despite it. As evening arrived, the ship sailed into calmer waters. The crew rested beneath the stars, grateful for another day survived. But ahead waited one final island. It was a place connected to the sun itself. There, sacred animals grazed peacefully beneath golden skies. And there, Odysseus would face a challenge not from the gods or monsters, but from the choices of his own companions. The voyage home continued. After escaping the dangers of Scylla and Charybdis, Odysseus and his companions continued their journey across the open sea. The survivors had endured storms, monsters, strange islands, and countless moments when hope seemed almost lost. Each challenge had taken something from them, but each had also carried them closer to home. Ahead lay the island of Thrinacia. From a distance, it appeared peaceful. Green fields stretched beneath the warm Mediterranean sun. Gentle hills rose above the shoreline, and the sounds of animals echoed across the quiet landscape. After the frightening passage through the narrow straits, the island seemed like a place of safety. But Odysseus remembered the warning of Tiresias and Circe. This was the island where the sacred cattle of the sun god Helios lived. The animals were not ordinary livestock. They belonged to the gods. Ancient Greeks believed that certain animals, places, and natural features carried special connections to the divine. The sun itself was not merely a source of light and warmth. It was a powerful presence that watched over the world. Helios, the sun god, traveled across the sky each day in a golden chariot, bringing daylight to mortals and immortals alike. His sacred cattle represented abundance, prosperity, and the unchanging order of nature. Odysseus knew they must not be harmed. Before stepping onto the island, he gathered his companions and spoke carefully. They could rest. They could find fresh water. They could repair their ships. But under no circumstances were they to touch the cattle. The men promised to obey. For a while, everything went well. The island offered them a peaceful place to recover. They found shelter, gathered supplies, and enjoyed a brief escape from the hardships of the sea. But the winds changed, and then they stopped completely. The ships remained stranded. Days passed, then weeks. The sailors' supplies began to disappear. Hunger slowly replaced their relief. Odysseus continued reminding them of the warning. The cattle must remain untouched. But hunger is a powerful force. The men had already endured years of hardship. They had watched friends disappear into storms and battles. They had crossed unfamiliar seas and faced dangers beyond imagination. Their patience began to weaken. One day, while Odysseus slept, his companions gathered together. Their leader had always protected them, but now their immediate needs seemed more important than future consequences. They convinced themselves that a small sacrifice would not matter. Perhaps the gods would forgive them. Perhaps they would offer better animals in return someday. It was a desperate decision made by exhausted people. They slaughtered the sacred cattle. They prepared a meal. For a brief moment, their hunger disappeared, but the consequences had already begun. When Odysseus awoke and discovered what had happened, he was filled with sorrow and fear. He knew the warning had been clear. The gods would not ignore such an offense. Soon, Helios learned what had occurred. The sun god was furious. He demanded justice from Zeus, threatening to take away his light from the world if the sailors were not punished. The other gods understood the seriousness of the offense. The sacred order had been broken. A punishment was inevitable. Eventually, the winds returned, allowing Odysseus and his companions to finally leave the island. Their departure seemed like a second chance, but it would be their last. As the ship sailed away, Zeus prepared his response. The sky darkened. Thunder echoed across the sea. A powerful storm rose suddenly around the vessel. Lightning struck the ship, tearing it apart. The wooden beams that had carried the men across thousands of miles were shattered beneath the force of the storm. One by one, Odysseus' remaining companions disappeared beneath the waves. The prophecy had come true. Only Odysseus survived. Clinging to pieces of the broken ship, he was carried helplessly across the sea. The currents pulled him back toward the very dangers he had hoped to escape. Once again, he faced the terrible choice between Scylla and Charybdis. Exhausted and alone, he managed to avoid the whirlpool and drifted away from the deadly waters. For days, he floated upon the waves. No companions remained. No ship carried him. No voices filled the empty sea. Only the endless horizon surrounded him. Eventually, the currents carried him to another distant shore. There he found himself upon the island of Ogygia, the home of Calypso. The same island where he would remain for many years. The same place where his journey would pause before beginning again. As Odysseus finished telling this part of his story to the Phaeacians, the great hall grew silent. They had heard of courage and cleverness. They had heard of monsters and storms. But now they understood the deepest tragedy of his voyage. A man who had sailed away with 12 ships and hundreds of companions had been reduced to a lone survivor. Only one thing remained unchanged: his desire to return home. And after years of wandering, the final part of his journey was finally approaching. The great hall of King Alcinous remained silent as Odysseus finished describing the loss of his companions and his lonely arrival upon the island of Calypso. so. The Phaeacians had listened for many hours. They had heard about the lotus eaters who forgot their homes, the terrible Cyclops who challenged Odysseus' cleverness, the winds that carried him away from Ithaca, and the many dangers that had transformed a simple voyage home into a legendary journey. Now they understood the weight the traveler carried. He was not simply a wandering sailor. He was a king who had lost nearly everything while trying to return to the people he loved. King Alcinous looked upon his guest with admiration and sympathy. The Phaeacians were famous for their ships, and they understood perhaps better than anyone what it meant to be separated from home by the endless sea. They promised Odysseus that they would help him complete his journey. A ship would be prepared. The finest sailors in the kingdom would guide him. At last, after 20 years away, the road to Ithaca was open. The next morning, the Phaeacians began their preparations. Their ships were unlike any others Odysseus had encountered. They were elegant vessels built for speed and precision, shaped by generations of sailors who understood the movements of the sea. Their curved wooden hulls could cut through waves with remarkable ease, and their experienced crews knew every current and wind pattern throughout their waters. Food and supplies were loaded aboard. Fresh bread, water, gifts from King Alcinous and Queen Arete. The people of the kingdom gathered at the harbor to say farewell. After so many years of uncertainty, Odysseus stood once more beside a ship prepared to carry him home. Yet he could hardly know what awaited him. Ithaca was not the same island he had left. While he had battled monsters and crossed distant seas, his home had been slowly changing. The palace that once welcomed him was now filled with strangers. His kingdom faced a threat that could not be defeated with a sword or a ship. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of hope. As the Phaeacian ship departed, the voyage was remarkably peaceful. Unlike earlier journeys, there were no storms, no monsters, no sudden dangers rising from the sea. The sailors moved with quiet confidence, guided by their knowledge and the favor of the gods. The waves carried them smoothly through the night as Odysseus finally moved toward the island he had dreamed of for so long. During the voyage, he slept. Not the restless sleep of a traveler watching for danger, but the deep rest of someone who finally trusted that the journey was ending. When the ship reached Ithaca, the sailors carefully carried him onto the shore while he remained asleep. They placed beside him the magnificent gifts he had received from the Phaeacians and quietly departed. When Odysseus finally awoke, he opened his eyes beneath a familiar sky. At first, he did not recognize where he was. After so many years of strange islands and distant lands, Ithaca seemed almost unfamiliar. The hills, the beaches, the forests, all of them belonged to memories from another life. Then Athena appeared before him. The goddess revealed that he had finally returned to his homeland. However, she warned him not to rush openly into the palace. Many dangers remained. The suitors still occupied his home. They still consumed his wealth. They still pressured Penelope to choose a new husband. If Odysseus entered the palace immediately and announced himself, he would face overwhelming opposition. He needed a plan. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, admired Odysseus for many reasons, but perhaps none more than his ability to think carefully before acting. Once again, she transformed him, not into a warrior king, but into a humble old traveler. His royal clothing disappeared. His appearance changed. His face became aged and weathered. The mighty king of Ithaca now looked like an ordinary beggar. It was a disguise that would allow him to move unnoticed and observe what had happened in his absence. Odysseus first visited the home of his loyal servant, the swineherd Eumaeus. Far from the palace, among the hills of Ithaca, Eumaeus lived a simple life caring for the royal pigs. Despite years of uncertainty, he remained faithful to his missing king. When the disguised Odysseus arrived, Eumaeus welcomed him immediately. He offered food. He offered shelter. He offered kindness. Even though he believed the stranger was only a poor traveler, he treated him with the same respect he would have shown any guest. This small act revealed something important. While Odysseus' palace had been filled with greed and disrespect, loyalty still survived among the humble people of Ithaca. That evening, beside a warm fire, Eumaeus shared stories of the kingdom. He spoke of Penelope's patience. He spoke of Telemachus' growth. He spoke of the suitors who had taken control of the palace. Odysseus listened quietly. After 2 decades away, he finally heard the truth about his home. The next steps would require patience. The warrior who had defeated Troy would need to wait. The sailor who had crossed impossible seas would need to remain hidden. The king who had once commanded armies would need to walk among his own people as a stranger. But the journey was not over. The greatest challenge was still ahead. Returning home had been difficult. Reclaiming it would be even harder. Deep within the hills of Ithaca, away from the noise and corruption of the royal palace, lived a man who had never forgotten his king. His name was Eumaeus. For many years, Eumaeus had served Odysseus faithfully. He was not a warrior celebrated in songs or a nobleman with great wealth. He was a humble swineherd who cared for the royal herds and lived a quiet life among the forests and fields. Yet in the eyes of Odysseus, loyalty mattered more than status. Now, after 20 years of separation, the disguised king sat beside the fire in Eumaeus' simple shelter, listening to stories of the home he had left behind. The hut was warm and welcoming. Bundles of wood rested near the entrance. Freshly prepared food filled the air with comforting scents. The sounds of animals moving nearby reminded Odysseus of a simpler world, far removed from the dangers he had faced across the sea. Eumaeus did not know the stranger before him was his missing king. To him, this was simply a weary traveler who had arrived seeking shelter. But that was enough. Eumaeus offered him food and a place to sleep, following the ancient Greek tradition of hospitality. Even though he had little to give, he shared what he had. This kindness revealed the true character of Ithaca's people. The kingdom had suffered during Odysseus' absence, but not everyone had abandoned honor and responsibility. As they ate together, Eumaeus spoke openly about his life and the struggles of the kingdom. He explained that many years had passed since Odysseus sailed away to Troy. The people of Ithaca had waited for his return, but eventually many assumed he would never come home. Penelope, however, had remained faithful. She continued living in the palace, refusing to choose another husband despite enormous pressure. The problem came from the many suitors who had gathered there. These men wanted Penelope to marry one of them so they could claim Odysseus' wealth and position. Instead of respectfully waiting for her decision, they moved into the palace and consumed the kingdom's resources. They ate the royal food. They drank the royal wine. They used Odysseus' home as if it belonged to them. Their behavior troubled Eumaeus deeply. He remembered the king who had once protected Ithaca and treated his people fairly. The thought of strangers dishonoring Odysseus' household filled him with sadness. Listening carefully, Odysseus felt a mixture of emotions. He was grateful to learn that Penelope had remained devoted. He was proud that Telemachus had grown into a young man worthy of respect. But he was also angry. The men who had invaded his home would eventually answer for their actions. Still, he knew patience was necessary. A sudden return would not guarantee victory. The suitors were numerous, and many people in the palace might not recognize him. Before revealing himself, Odysseus needed information, allies, and a careful plan. Meanwhile, far away from the swineherd's hut, Telemachus was returning to Ithaca. With Athena's guidance, the young prince had completed his search for news of his father. He had visited the kingdoms of Nestor and Menelaus, learning stories of the Trojan War and discovering that Odysseus was still alive. Now he sailed home carrying a renewed sense of purpose. Telemachus was no longer the uncertain child who had grown up without his father. He had become a thoughtful young man. He had traveled across the sea. He had spoken with kings. He had begun to understand the responsibilities of leadership. When he reached Ithaca, Athena guided him toward Eumaeus' home. The meeting between father and son was carefully arranged. At first, Telemachus did not recognize the disguised Odysseus. He saw only an old traveler sitting beside the fire. But Athena removed the disguise. The aged beggar transformed into the strong and familiar figure of the king of Ithaca. Telemachus stood frozen. For years, he had imagined this moment. He had wondered what his father would look like. He had wondered if he would ever hear his voice. Now, the impossible had happened. Odysseus was standing before him. Father and son embraced. The reunion was filled with emotion that words could barely express. 20 years of separation disappeared in a single moment. Odysseus explained where he had been and how he had finally returned. He told Telemachus that their enemies still occupied the palace and that they could not reveal his identity too soon. Together, they would need to reclaim their home carefully. The two of them began forming a plan. They would enter the palace quietly. They would observe the suitors. They would wait for the right moment. The same cleverness that had helped Odysseus escape Troy and survive the Cyclops would now be used for a different kind of battle. Not against monsters, not against storms, but against those who had taken advantage of his absence. As father and son sat together beneath the stars of Ithaca, the future finally began to change. The long years of waiting were ending. The king had returned, and soon, the palace would learn that Odysseus was not a forgotten man lost at sea. He was coming home. The morning after Odysseus reunited with Telemachus, the island of Ithaca felt different. For 20 years, the king had been a distant memory. Some believed he had died at sea. Others wondered if he had found another life somewhere across the endless waters. But now, hidden among his own people, Odysseus had returned. The time had come to reclaim what had been taken from him. Yet the king who once led armies at Troy could not simply walk into his palace and announce his arrival. The suitors who occupied his home were many, and they had grown comfortable with their power. They would not surrender their position easily. Odysseus needed patience. He needed a plan. With Athena's guidance, he and Telemachus prepared carefully. The first step was to remove all weapons from the palace hall. The suitors were used to seeing spears, swords, and shields hanging on the walls, but Odysseus knew that leaving them available would only create danger. Under the excuse of protecting the weapons from damage, Telemachus carried them away and stored them safely. Only 2 weapons remained hidden, the ones they would need when the moment arrived. Meanwhile, Odysseus continued his disguise. To everyone else, he appeared to be an old beggar who had arrived in Ithaca seeking shelter. The transformation was remarkable. The mighty king who had fought at Troy now walked with a bent posture and worn clothing. His hands appeared rough from years of hardship. His face showed the signs of age and suffering. But beneath the disguise remained the same sharp mind, the same patience, the same determination. When Odysseus approached the palace, he saw what had become of his home. The once orderly halls were filled with strangers. The suitors sat comfortably at tables meant for the royal family. They laughed loudly, drank freely, and consumed the wealth of Ithaca without concern. They had forgotten that they were guests. They acted as if they were already kings. Odysseus watched silently. The sight must have been painful. The palace where he had once celebrated victories and shared meals with his family had become a place of arrogance and disrespect. Yet he controlled his anger. A wise warrior knows that the right moment matters more than immediate action. As the disguised traveler entered the hall, one person immediately recognized his importance. His old dog, Argos. Argos had once been a young and energetic hunting dog, trained by Odysseus before he sailed to Troy. He had been loyal and faithful, always waiting for his master's return. But 20 years had passed. Now Argos lay weak and forgotten near the entrance of the palace. When he saw the stranger approaching, the old dog lifted his head. Even after 2 decades, even beneath a disguise, Argos recognized his owner. His tail moved gently. His ears lifted. For one brief moment, The faithful animal saw the master he had been waiting for all those years. Odysseus quietly wiped away a tear. He could not reveal himself. He could not embrace his old companion. He could only watch. Shortly afterward, Argos closed his eyes and passed away. His final wish had been fulfilled. He had seen Odysseus return home. The moment carried a quiet sadness. The loyal dog represented all that had waited for the king's return: the people, the memories, and the life that had continued without him. Inside the palace, however, the suitors remained unaware. They mocked the beggar. They insulted him. They treated him with the same arrogance they had shown toward everyone else. One of the suitors, Antinous, was especially cruel. Instead of offering kindness to a poor traveler, he threw a stool at Odysseus, striking him painfully. The room grew quiet. Everyone saw what had happened. Even among the suitors, such behaviors seemed excessive. But Odysseus remained calm. He understood that anger would only reveal the truth. The beggar had to endure humiliation. The king had to wait. That evening, Penelope heard about the stranger who had arrived at the palace. Although she did not know his identity, something about him caught her attention. After years of disappointment and uncertainty, she had become careful with her hopes. Too many men had claimed to know the fate of Odysseus. Too many promises had been made. Still, she wished to speak with the traveler. Perhaps he carried news. Perhaps he had heard a story from distant lands. Perhaps he knew something about the husband she had waited for all these years. The meeting between Penelope and the disguised Odysseus would be one of the most emotional moments of his return. But first, Odysseus needed to discover who remained loyal and who had betrayed him. The palace was filled with hidden dangers. The suitors believed they had already won. They believed the king of Ithaca was gone forever. They did not know that the man sitting quietly among them was the very person they feared. The return of Odysseus had begun, and the final pieces of his plan were falling into place. Within the palace of Ithaca, the disguised Odysseus waited patiently. For 20 years, he had dreamed of this moment. He had imagined walking through his own halls, embracing his wife, and seeing his son grown into a man. But now that he had finally returned, he could not reveal himself. The greatest challenge was not crossing the sea. It was knowing when to act. Odysseus had always understood the importance of patience. During the Trojan War, his clever strategies had helped defeat a powerful enemy. On his journey home, his intelligence had saved him from impossible situations. Now, his greatest weapon was still his mind. Not far away, Penelope prepared to meet the mysterious traveler who had arrived at her palace. She had spent years surrounded by uncertainty. Every day, she faced the same difficult choice. Should she continue waiting for Odysseus? Or should she accept that he would never return? The suitors constantly pressured her to choose one of them. They filled her home, demanded her attention, and consumed the wealth of Ithaca. Yet Penelope refused to abandon hope. Her loyalty had become legendary. But loyalty did not mean she was unaware of reality. She had learned to be cautious. When she entered the hall, she saw the old beggar sitting among the guests. She did not know that beneath his worn clothing was the husband she had mourned for years. Odysseus carefully maintained his disguise. He spoke to Penelope as a stranger, telling her that he had traveled widely and had heard stories of her husband. Penelope listened closely. She asked if he had truly met Odysseus. The disguised king assured her that he had. He described Odysseus' appearance, his clothing, and his character with such detail that Penelope was deeply moved. The stranger's words sounded like someone who truly knew the man she had loved and waited for. Still, she remained cautious. She had learned that hope could be painful. Many travelers had brought stories before, only for those stories to end in disappointment. During their conversation, Penelope revealed her own struggles. She explained how the suitors had taken over her household and refused to leave. She described how they demanded that she choose a new husband despite her continued faithfulness. Then she shared the clever trick she had used to delay them. For years, Penelope had been weaving a burial cloth for Laertes, Odysseus' elderly father. She told the suitors that she would choose a husband once the cloth was complete. But each night, after everyone went to sleep, she secretly unraveled the work she had done during the day. The task that should have taken only months lasted for years. Her intelligence matched Odysseus' own. She had fought her battle not with weapons, but with patience and deception. Eventually, however, the suitors discovered her secret. Her clever plan could no longer protect her. Now she faced increasing pressure to decide. After listening to her story, Odysseus felt a deep admiration for his wife. The woman he remembered had become even stronger. She had protected their home. She had protected their son. She had protected his memory. Yet he still remained silent. The time to reveal himself had not arrived. Later, another important moment occurred. The old nurse Euryclea, who had cared for Odysseus since childhood, was asked to wash the beggar's feet. She approached the stranger with kindness, as she had done for countless guests before. As she washed his feet, her hand touched a familiar scar. It was a mark Odysseus had received during a hunting accident when he was young. Immediately, she recognized him. The old nurse remembered the child she had raised, the warrior who had left for Troy, the king she thought she would never see again. Her eyes filled with tears. She nearly cried out his name, but Odysseus quickly stopped her. He reminded her that the time for revealing the truth had not yet come. The palace was still dangerous. The suitors still controlled the halls. If his identity was discovered too soon, everything they had planned could fail. Euryclea agreed to remain silent. The secret was safe. Meanwhile, Penelope considered what she would do next. She decided to announce a contest that would determine her future. She would offer a challenge involving Odysseus' great bow. The weapon had belonged to her husband and had not been touched since he left for Troy. The man who could string the bow and shoot an arrow perfectly through a series of targets would become her new husband. To the suitors, this seemed like an opportunity. They believed one of them would succeed. They believed Odysseus was only a memory. They did not know that the rightful owner of the bow stood among them. The next day would change everything. The palace that had been filled with arrogance and disrespect would finally face judgment. The king had returned. The bow awaited, and the final act of Odysseus' journey was about to begin. The great hall of Ithaca was filled with anticipation. For years, the suitors had competed for Penelope's attention, believing that time was on their side. They had consumed the wealth of Odysseus' household, enjoyed endless feasts, and treated the palace as if it already belonged to them. They believed the missing king would never return. They were wrong. Among them sat a quiet old beggar. No one suspected that the man watching from the shadows was the very person whose home they had taken. Odysseus waited calmly as Penelope brought forward the great bow. It was an ancient weapon that carried memories of another time. Crafted with incredible skill, the bow had belonged to Odysseus before he sailed to Troy. It represented his strength, his identity, and his place as the rightful king of Ithaca. The suitors looked at it with confidence. They saw only a challenge. They did not understand what the bow truly meant. Penelope announced the contest. The man who could string Odysseus' bow and shoot an arrow cleanly through a series of axe heads would become her husband. The challenge seemed simple, but the bow was famous for its difficulty. Only Odysseus had ever mastered it. The suitors stepped forward one by one. The first man picked up the bow and struggled. He pulled at the string with all his strength, but the weapon would not bend. The more he tried, the more obvious it became that the bow was not meant for him. Another suitor attempted the same, then another. Each failed. The proud men who believed they could replace Odysseus were defeated by the weapon of the man they had forgotten. As the contest continued, frustration filled the hall. The suitors began blaming the bow itself. Perhaps it was too old. Perhaps it had been damaged. Perhaps no one could complete the challenge. But the truth was much simpler. The bow belonged to Odysseus. Meanwhile, the disguised king watched carefully. Every moment revealed more about the men who had invaded his home. Their arrogance, impatience, and disrespect confirmed what he already knew. They were not worthy of ruling Ithaca. Then the old beggar spoke. He asked if he might try the bow. The hall erupted with laughter. The suitors mocked him. They believed the poor traveler was being foolish. How could someone who looked weak and exhausted succeed where strong young nobles had failed? But Telemachus and Penelope's servants understood that something unusual was happening. Telemachus stepped forward and supported the stranger's request. The suitors protested, but Penelope allowed the attempt. The bow was placed into Odysseus' hands. For the first time in 20 years, the king held his own weapon again. He examined it carefully. He ran his fingers along the wood. He remembered the countless days when he had carried it. The hall grew quiet. Then, with surprising ease, Odysseus bent the bow. The string slipped perfectly into place. A sound echoed through the palace. The weapon was ready. The suitors stared in disbelief. The old beggar had done what none of them could. But Odysseus was not finished. He placed an arrow against the string. The target stood before him. One after another, the axe heads aligned. He released. The arrow flew straight through every opening, exactly as the challenge required. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then Odysseus lowered the bow. The contest was complete. But the true meaning of the moment was far greater than winning a competition. The bow had revealed the truth. The rightful king had returned. Athena watched from nearby, guiding events toward their conclusion. Odysseus looked toward Telemachus. His son understood. The time for hiding was over. The stranger was no longer simply a beggar. He was Odysseus, king of Ithaca. The same warrior who had survived Troy, the same sailor who had crossed impossible seas, the same man who had spent 20 years fighting his way home. The suitors still did not fully understand what was happening. They laughed nervously. They wondered why the old traveler held the bow with such confidence. Then Odysseus turned toward them. The disguise was gone. The patience was over. The king had returned. With a bow in his hands, Odysseus prepared for the final battle. Not against an army, not against a monster, but against the men who had dishonored his home and forgotten that a king was still waiting beyond the horizon. The halls of Ithaca had belonged to the suitors for too long. Now they would learn the cost of their arrogance. The great hall of Ithaca stood frozen in silence. The suitors had laughed at the old beggar. They had mocked his worn clothing. They had assumed he was powerless. But now the truth stood before them. The stranger holding the bow was not a wandering traveler. He was Odysseus, the king they believed was lost forever. For a moment, no one moved. The men who had filled the palace with arrogance and greed struggled to understand what they were seeing. The person they had ignored and insulted was the very man whose home they had stolen. The same man who had fought at Troy. The same man who had survived years of storms and dangers. The same man who had finally returned. Odysseus looked around the hall. He saw the faces of the men who had consumed his wealth and disrespected his family. He remembered every insult, every stolen meal, and every moment when his household had been treated without honor. But he did not act out of simple anger. He acted as a king restoring order. The doors of the hall had been secured. Telemachus stood beside him. The loyal servants who had waited for Odysseus' return were ready. The moment they had planned for had arrived. The first arrow flew. The suitors immediately realized they were trapped. Their confidence disappeared. Only moments earlier, they had believed they were untouchable. Now they understood that the balance of power had completely changed. They reached for weapons, but Odysseus and Telemachus had already prepared for this. The hidden weapons were gone. The palace belonged to its rightful owner again. The battle that followed was fierce. Odysseus moved with the skill of a warrior who had spent years fighting across distant lands. The man who once commanded armies at Troy had not lost his strength or his courage. Telemachus fought beside him. This was not only a battle to reclaim a palace. It was the moment when a son finally stood beside his father. For years, Telemachus had grown up hearing stories of Odysseus but never knowing him. Now he fought alongside the father he had searched for, proving that he had become a worthy heir to Ithaca. The loyal servants also played their part. Eumaeus, the faithful swineherd, and Philoetius, the loyal cattle herder, helped defend the palace. Unlike the suitors, they had remained faithful through years of uncertainty. Their loyalty was rewarded, not because they were wealthy or powerful, but because they had remained honorable. The suitors attempted to fight back, but they were unprepared. They had grown comfortable with luxury and had forgotten the discipline required of true warriors. One by one, their advantage disappeared. The men who had spent years wasting Odysseus' resources now faced the consequences of their actions. Among them was Antinous, the most arrogant of the suitors. He had been the first to insult Odysseus when the king arrived disguised as a beggar. He had shown cruelty without hesitation, believing there would never be consequences. Now he understood the mistake. The palace was no longer a place where he could act without fear. The king had returned. Another suitor, Eurymachus, attempted to plead for mercy. He claimed that Antinous had been the true leader and that the others had only followed along. But Odysseus knew the truth. They had all chosen their actions. They had all benefited from his absence. They had all dishonored his household. Justice had finally arrived. As the battle ended, the palace became quiet once again. The laughter of the suitors was gone. The endless feasts were over. The halls that had been filled with disrespect were returned to peace. But one final challenge remained. Penelope still needed proof. Even after everything that had happened, she needed to know that the man before her was truly Odysseus. After 20 years of waiting, she could not simply accept a claim without certainty. And Odysseus understood. He knew his wife's wisdom. He knew her caution. In many ways, it was what he loved about her. The final test would not involve weapons. It would not require strength or strategy. It would require knowledge of the quiet details that only two people who shared a life together would understand. Their reunion would depend on a secret hidden within their own home. A secret that no stranger could know. The battle for Ithaca was over. The battle to prove that Odysseus had truly returned was about to begin. The great battle in the palace of Ithaca had ended. The suitors who had taken advantage of Odysseus' absence were gone. The halls that had once been filled with arrogance and greed were quiet again. The kingdom had been restored to its rightful ruler. Yet one final uncertainty remained. Penelope stood before the man who claimed to be her husband. But after 20 years of separation, she could not simply accept his words. She had waited too long. She had endured too much. Her careful nature, the same wisdom that had helped her resist the suitors for so many years, required proof. Odysseus understood. He did not become angry at her doubt. Instead, he admired it. Penelope had survived in the same way he had survived, with patience, intelligence, and caution. She decided to test him. Speaking to her servants, she instructed them to move the royal bed from their private chamber and prepare it for the returning king. To anyone else, the request would seem ordinary. But Odysseus immediately reacted. "The bed cannot be moved," he said. Penelope watched carefully. She had discovered the secret that would prove whether this man was truly Odysseus. Long before he sailed to Troy, Odysseus had built their marriage bed himself. It was not an ordinary piece of furniture. It had been carved around the trunk of a living olive tree that grew within the walls of their home. The bed was connected to the earth itself. Only Odysseus and Penelope knew this. No stranger could possibly understand. Odysseus explained how he had built the bed and how the olive tree remained part of their room. He remembered every detail. At last, Penelope knew. The man before her was truly her husband. The disguise, the years of hardship, the stories of his adventures, all of it was real. The king of Ithaca had returned. After 2 decades apart, husband and wife finally embraced. The reunion was not filled with grand speeches or celebrations. It was something quieter, something more powerful. 2 people who had spent years wondering if they would ever see each other again were finally together. The war, the storms, the monsters, the endless wandering, all of it had led to this moment. That night, Odysseus and Penelope shared the stories of everything they had missed. He told her about Troy, about the long journey home, about the strange lands and impossible dangers he had faced. She told him about Ithaca, about raising Telemachus without him, about protecting their household from the suitors. They discovered that while the world around them had changed, the bond between them had remained. Their reunion marked the end of one journey and the beginning of another, because a kingdom is not restored simply by removing its enemies. It must also be healed. The people of Ithaca had lived through years of uncertainty. Some had remained loyal, while others had allowed the absence of their king to weaken their respect for tradition and order. Odysseus now faced the task of rebuilding, but he was no longer the same young king who had sailed away to Troy. The years had changed him. He had learned patience from storms, humility from wandering, wisdom from suffering. He had discovered that returning home was not only about reaching a place. It was about understanding what home truly meant. For Odysseus, home was not simply the island of Ithaca. It was Penelope. It was Telemachus. It was the loyal servants who had waited. It was the memories that connected him to the life he had left behind. The gods who had guided and challenged him also watched as his long journey reached its conclusion. Athena, who had protected Odysseus through many trials, helped bring peace between the people of Ithaca. The cycle of revenge and conflict finally came to an end. The island could begin again. The story of Odysseus would continue to be told for generations. Not because he was the strongest warrior, not because he defeated the greatest enemies, but because he endured. He survived years of uncertainty without losing sight of what mattered most. He used intelligence when strength failed. He showed courage when fear was overwhelming. And above all, he never stopped searching for home. The Odyssey is a story about a journey across seas and through strange worlds, but its deepest meaning is much simpler. It is the story of a person longing for belonging, a person separated from everything familiar, a person who, despite every obstacle, continued moving toward the place and people he loved. At last, the waves grew quiet. The storms passed. The long road ended. Odysseus was home. The story of Odysseus has traveled farther than any ship could ever sail. For thousands of years, people have gathered to hear the tale of the king of Ithaca who crossed dangerous seas, encountered mysterious islands, and faced challenges that tested every part of his character. At first glance, the Odyssey appears to be a story about adventure. It is filled with monsters, enchanted lands, powerful gods, and impossible escapes. But beneath those wonders lies something much more familiar. It is a story about longing. It is a story about the feeling of being far away from the people and places that matter most. When Odysseus sailed away to fight at Troy, he believed his absence would be temporary. Like many travelers throughout history, he expected to leave home, complete his task, and return quickly. Instead, his journey stretched into years. The path home became more difficult than he could have imagined. He faced storms that scattered his ships. He encountered creatures that challenged his courage. He entered unfamiliar lands where nothing followed the rules he knew. Each obstacle forced him to rely on something deeper than physical strength. His greatest weapon was never his sword. It was his ability to think. Odysseus survived because he understood that every challenge required a different response. Against the Cyclops, strength was useless, so he used cleverness. Against the Sirens, he recognized his own weaknesses and prepared for temptation. Against the many dangers of the sea, he learned that patience could be just as powerful as bravery. His journey was not only across the Mediterranean, it was also a journey of transformation. The man who left Ithaca was a warrior seeking victory. The man who returned was someone who understood the value of peace. He had seen kingdoms rise and fall. He had watched companions disappear. He had experienced both kindness and cruelty from strangers. Through every hardship, one idea remained constant. Home mattered. The Odyssey also reminds us of the people who wait while others are away. Penelope's story is just as important as Odysseus. While he battled the dangers of distant lands, she fought a different kind of battle. She protected their household through intelligence, patience, and determination. She kept hope alive in a world where many believed hope was foolish. Telemachus, too, had his own journey. He grew from a young man uncertain of his place in the world into someone capable of standing beside his father. His story shows that returning home is not only about finding a place again. Sometimes, it is about discovering who you have become. The Odyssey has remained meaningful because its themes are timeless. People have always left home. They have always crossed oceans, searched for new opportunities, and faced uncertainty. They have always experienced the difficulty of returning after being changed by their experiences. Odysseus' journey reflects something universal. The world is unpredictable. The road ahead is rarely simple. There will always be storms. There will always be unknown shores. There will always be moments when the destination seems impossibly far away. But the journey continues. And perhaps the greatest lesson of Odysseus is not that he overcame every obstacle. He did not. He lost ships. He lost companions. He made mistakes. He suffered consequences. What made him remarkable was that he continued forward despite everything he lost. He kept searching. He kept hoping. He kept moving toward home. As the final waves of his story settle, the image left behind is not one of a warrior standing victorious in battle. It is the image of a traveler finally resting after a long road. A sailor who has seen the edges of the world. A husband reunited with his wife. A father reunited with his son. A king returning to the land that had waited for him. The sea is quiet. The stars shine above Ithaca. The fires burn warmly within the palace halls. And after 20 years of wandering, Odysseus has finally arrived where he always belonged. Good night.